Okay, welcome to join the committee meeting. First of all, for the overall status, 1.14.1, we are good on track, and there is one open issue left, and there is also a draft PR submitted by Shuga. And 1.15, we have reached the feature freeze on 25th, and all candidate issues have been cleared. And so the next phase, FB is on 36th August. So let's just work on the issues and meet target. Yeah, that's the overall status. And I'm still working on the data model microservice task, and a new PR has been submitted yesterday, so you can start to review that. And after that, I will submit another PR, and with that PR, the basic workflow will, the basic workflow with the microservice data more will be able to work, and will be able to work. So you can have a try on and the test, and later there will be another PR to handle the restart scenario. So that is the plan. And I will also work on the backup repository configuration implementation. Another PR will be submitted. That's all my side.
About the data mover microservice. So, do you know if any testing is planned or has been done with that to make sure that everything still works with block volumes for data mover? That was kind of one concern that we had on our side, to make sure that with all the refactoring that's still going to work. And on our side, once it's in place, we do plan on doing testing with ODP as well for that. I just want to make sure that use case that we implemented in 1.13 or 1.14, I forget which one, is still going to be working and tested.
Yes, thanks. And yes, the block volume backup restore will be still work, and this has been considered during the design, but we still need some tests on that. So thanks. Yeah, that's it. And next one, please.
I'm working on support to run E2E test case parallel. And second task is repository maintenance job configuration implementation. Both are in progress. And that's all from my side.
Okay, thanks. And Tiger, please.
Hi, so I opened a design for retrying status patching on backup and restore resource. This was an issue where the restore were stuck in progress indefinitely. So please take a look. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We'll have a look at that. Yeah, and Scott, please.
Yeah. So for the backup performance improvements, the first PR was released a bit earlier. I have a couple of acts on there. I think there's still some reviews out. So if anyone else wants to look into this or review it or whatever, feel free. Hopefully we can get that merged this week. We've got some reviews already. I have a second PR that builds on this. So it's currently a draft PR because it depends on that commit. Once the first PR gets merged, I'll rebase this one. And this one implements the actual item block action plugins for the internal built-in plugin types. There was a question on the PR was, is this going to break anything if we merge it now? And it should not. I'm going to do some more testing because this adds the plugin types, or sorry, the plugins, but it registers them, but they're just not called in the workflow. So they're not going to be used. If I do a backup and restore with this coded place, these plugins will never get called. So until we implement those workflow changes with the item blocks and the change to the behavior, that's the point where these plugins will start to get called. And this is just to break up the work into multiple PRs so that we don't have a huge PR with all of the changes in, but I'm making sure that each incremental PR doesn't break anything. So in these first two PRs, we're adding infrastructure that we're going to need for later, but it's not actually being called or used yet. So it's not going to break anything.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah, Scott, thank you for working on that. My understanding is for this task, backup performance improvement, is they may change some basic logic for the backup restore.
Yeah, on the back,
yeah, I understand. For the first PR, you just explained it is about the basically infrastructure we need to add to for support that. We did not break any changes right now.
Yep.
Yeah, but I would suggest and to understand for the following PR, when you make change for the basic logic or backup restore, is there any end-to-end testing at your side or at Red Hat side to cover all the, full regulation for the Velero or about that part?
So the existing end-to-end testing that just tests backups is going to still be testing this. We're not, because the first phase in 1.15 is not actually doing anything in parallel yet. This is just setting up the structure around it. The intent is that with the refactoring in place, backup behavior essentially should work just like it is today. So if existing tests still succeed, the backups work. That's kind of testing that the changes are still working as designed. That's a good question about end testing. When we get to the point in the phase 2, probably in 1.16, where we actually are able to back up items in parallel, I don't know what the best way of testing that or proving that that's happening is, because the basic end-to-end tests are just, hey, did the backup work? Are the items here? Did the restore work? So we're going to have to probably do some thinking about the best way of ensuring that's all happening properly. Obviously, performance testing will show it because we expect to see some differences. But in terms of basic end-to-end tests, again, I think the main part is just to make sure that this workflow change to make it more efficient in some cases where you have lots of items. Basically, the most important thing is that the correctness of the backup is not impacted. So backups work, succeed, and restores have the right data, just like today.
Yeah, I think that's our intention. I think it's two parts. One is the current backup restore logic, and the test case E2E test center will not be broken by this improvement. Right. Second one, we can see the performance is actually improved by this proposal implementation of this proposal from your side. So I would suggest we maybe probably you guys also need to think about before the actual logic change PR get merged to the main branch, there should be there should be enough testing to cover those kind of errors.
Yeah, and certainly the regression testing to make sure nothing breaks is covered. The actual performance improvements where we actually see, when you have a bunch of CSI snapshots and a bunch of volumes and a big backup, we're not going to see that in 1.15 because those improvements are going to be seen once we actually create multiple reconciler threads, which that's phase 2. So 1.15 is not going to have that. This is just the refactoring of the logic to group items together, but we're still doing everything in a single reconcile thread in 1.15 because we had decided that this was too much work to put in a single release. So we were going to split it up, phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 is the refactoring. Phase 2 has the actual multi-threaded.
Yeah. Sorry. So phase 1, we also refactor some code, the current code to make the basic infrastructure in place before we do phase 2. Is that
yes,
correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
So the goal for phase 1 is to have the infrastructure in place to be ready for going multi-threaded and to make sure that the backup logic works just like before. So none of the backups break, none of the restores break, but we're not going to actually see any noticeable improvements in performance in phase 1.
Okay.
Just kind of setting the refactoring, getting ready for that in 1.16 phase 2.
Yeah. So there's still will be some code change about the refactor, right?
Yeah, exactly. The first 2 PRs are just setting up the plugin types and the new plugins. The third PR is going to have the bulk of the remaining work, which is the item block model and the changes to the backup workflow to group the items together. that's going to be the refactoring that actually changes the way the backup runs. The end result will be the same items backed up. And so again, the basic test that this is working is that we refactor it and we don't break anything. All the end-to-end tests still work. All the integration, regression testing, all that still works. You know, on the OEDP Red Hat side, you know, our scale environment testing is going to still work, our QE. So all of this existing testing that we already test for every release, you know, gets applied here to make sure that this refactoring is non-destructive, that everything works exactly as planned, but we're not actually going to get the benefits of this until we build onto it with phase 2.
Yeah, understood. So I understand. So we have already enough testing to cover that. Yeah. Okay, got it.
And that's enough testing, Scott, by default, without enabling any particular flags in the upstream end-to-end tests, or maybe we'll spend a little bit of extra time to make sure that is in fact the case.
Yeah, I mean, basically right now, whatever we're testing, I mean, if the testing we do, you know, we did for 1.14, for example, was sufficient to prove that we didn't, you know, that everything's still working, I think
Sure.
that same level of testing probably makes sense here, because this is, again, just another refactoring. It's changing behind the scenes.
Right.
Some of the way, the order at which certain things get called, but the end result is the backup tarball is going to have all the same things as it had before. The same plugins in terms of
Right.
backup item actions that modify things are going to get called. The same volumes are going to get, you know, backed up.
Okay.
So, you know, if we're confident that our existing regression testing and automated testing is sufficient, we're
Right.
good. If we think in general we want more testing, that's never a bad thing, but that's not. It's not that this change means we need more testing. It's if we think we already have enough testing, this is just more functionality that gets tested with the same framework. If in the absence of this, we still think, hey, there's some other testing we want to add.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. And you know, I think in that sense, it's kind of like if you think about the data mover work that we're doing in another work effort, you know, the Podify data mover.
Yeah.
End result is you're going to have the same data in the same place. Your
Yep.
existing testing for data mover should be sufficient to make sure to prove that that's actually doing the right thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We just want to be careful, pragmatic,
course.
and open to.
Yeah, right. That's also my point. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I do expect to start work on that third PR probably after the first gets merged, so I don't have too many draft PRs out there. But my hope is that the first PR gets merged this week. The second PR will get rebased and ready for review, and then I'll start pushing out the changes for that final, or actually not final, the third PR. But there's a fourth PR at the end, which is going to be, we've got to document these plugin types and tell users how to deal with that. That's kind of on the plugin documentation that will also be included. But again, that'll be in a separate PR.
Okay. Well, I think Xinhua will take another look on the first PR, and then we'll be able to merge that.
Yeah, and again, right now the second PR shows up. It says there's 2 commits. The first commit is that other PR because it's built on it. So when I rebase the PR, you'll see only one commit. So right now this PR includes both changes, just so that, because again, it kind of depends on the other. But once the first PR merges and I rebase this PR, one of those will disappear here.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Is that all, Scott?
Oh yes.
Anything else? Okay. Thanks. Okay. So next one is a discussion topic. The first one is about the rapid deprecation. So we all know some background, like you know, we have an initiative about the rapid deprecation maybe some long time ago, but recently we have merged the deprecation policy for Velero PR. So I want to check everyone about how are we going to do with the deprecation of rapid. So you know, as a policy, we need to create a PR to deprecate rapid, and then after 2 minor release, we disable the backup, and then after another 2 minor release, we disable the backup and install, and maybe remove the code. So, but here the different thing is before the initiative, before the policy, the initiative had been talked about for maybe for 2 releases. So what do you think is the best way about this one?
Yeah. So my thinking was, when we put together the deprecation policy document, RESTIC was kind of the first use case we had in mind. That was why we needed to have it in place. We wanted to have a deprecation policy in place so we could properly deprecate RESTIC. And the importance with deprecation policies is not how long you've talked about it, is that until you've actually deprecated in a release and users are getting that warning saying it's deprecated, the clock doesn't start, because you need users who aren't in all these meetings, that aren't involved in the discussions, to see the deprecation warnings. They run a backup in 1.15, for example. If we deprecate it with RESTIC, they get a deprecation warning on their backup saying RESTIC is deprecated, it'll be removed, in a future release. That's when that's the user's first information that, hey, this is going away, because the average user is not on this meeting, not following the PRs. So they get the deprecation warning on their backup. They have no idea that it's going away. So I think the clock, the 2 releases, starts when we deprecate it. So if we want to deprecate it in 1.15, I think that's the perfect time to do it. Then that's when that starts. RESTIC has an additional complication, which again, the deprecation policy goes into detail about this kind of thing, where even when we remove the functionality to do a RESTIC backup, we can't at the same time remove the ability to restore an old backup with RESTIC, because otherwise, say 1.17 is the last release before we remove RESTIC backups. If a user creates a backup on 1.17 with RESTIC, still supported but deprecated, they upgrade to 1.18, that RESTIC backup is suddenly useless if we remove the ability to restore. So I think the restore functionality probably needs to be around a bit longer than the backup functionality. But I think the backup is the one we can remove into 2 releases after we deprecate it. We remove the ability for users to create new RESTIC backups.
Yeah, and just to layer on to that, I mean, nothing would make me happier than nuking RESTIC from orbit out of the code base and the function. But I also know that there are third-party projects and products built on top of Velero who don't participate, unfortunately, in this community very well, that are still utilizing RESTIC. So I think what Scott said, starting it in 1.15 with the backup, removing backup in 1.17, and then leaving restore out there for a little while longer, probably is the best way not catch any other companies by surprise, and we should be fairly vocal.
The thing about backups and warnings in particular is that the users don't read docs, but they definitely notice warnings on their backups. If I run a backup and I get a warning, I'm going to see that. We get users all the time saying, "Hey, I didn't like this warning." So with 1.15, if we deprecate RESTIC and they use RESTIC as their uploader, every RESTIC backup they do is going to have a warning on it saying it's deprecated. So it's going to be obvious. That they'll have plenty of time to move on to Copia and put bugs in, because that's the other issue with the deprecation, is that you have users that are only using RESTIC that have never moved to Copia, and they may discover bugs in Copia when they move over that we have to fix for their use cases that we haven't seen yet because they haven't tried Copia yet.
And I'll also say this, like, if we would have, as a community, been more prompt in getting that deprecation policy review and merged, I think maybe it would have been this release or the next release where we'd be removing RESTIC from backups. So it's kind of, we shot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, Tiger, I don't think we need a new status for that. I think a standard warning is all we need to do. We just do a warning on the backup. We already have the status for that. On backup, logged.warn is enough to cause the warning to go. I think that's all we need to do for RESTIC is to create a warning.
Sorry. Let me try.
Yeah.
Let me check if I can follow all of this.
Yeah.
Talking. So here, first of all, the warning. So Scott, when you say the warning, you mean as part of the backup deprecation?
Yeah, exactly. In 1.15, in other words, if we deprecate Restic in 115, that means we can put a backup warning on 115 saying Restic has been deprecated. It's going to be removed in a future release. The backup is still successful. You know, it's just a warning. It does, because if you deprecate, you know, an error on a backup makes it partially fail. The warning on a backup is still going to be a completed backup, so it won't show up as an error, but they'll see it as a warning on their backup. And that should kind of give the user an idea they should start moving to Copia. So in 115, we'll deprecate it and we'll put a warning on a backup that uses Restic. I think we can't remove it until 117. I think that's what the deprecation policy says. So 116 will still be the same as 115. It'll be a warning, but they can still back up. 117 is when we remove the ability to create a new, in 117, you can no longer set uploader type to Restic.
Yeah. So 170, we remove the backup.
Yes.
Sorry. We remove the backup. Okay. That. We remove the backup.
Yes.
And then maybe in 119, we remove the restore. Right.
That sounds reasonable to me. Yeah, I think that's. I can't remember whether the deprecation policy is explicit about that kind of thing, but 119 is reasonable, I think, because what that says is that a user is on 117, uses Restic for the last time right before they upgrade to 118. They have until they go to 119 to basically replace all of their backups with Copia backups, and so they'll no longer be able to restore those Restic backups.
I'll look at what it says. We shouldn't just guess and like.
Yeah, I mean, right, obviously, but
yeah, and actually, according, if we strictly follow the policy, which for at the start of the deprecation, maybe in 1.15, I need to create an issue in the GitHub in the community, and by the way, do nothing. And after 2 minor releases, if all the prime parties had approved the issue, we will start to remove we will start to remove the backup. That's the policy. That's about what we mentioned in the policy, right? So here, Scott mean in 1.15 we create warning, but the backup still work. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what deprecated in general means. Deprecated means that we say it's no longer going to be supported, but as of today, you can still use it. Just like with Kubernetes features that are deprecated, they'll deprecate it in a certain release. You can still use it; it's still fully functional, but you get warnings saying in a future release it's going to go away. And then once that goes away in that future release, then it's completely unable to be used. We have this weird thing with backups, because we need older backups to work for a while, that, when we remove the ability to create new Restic backups in 1.17, we still need to have some time before we remove the ability to restore those backups, which again, the deprecation policy addresses there as well. But yeah, the way we go about it in the code is going to be something like, again, on 115, a warning in the backup, possibly a warning at, in the installer too, when you set uploader type to Restic, that could be a warning. In 1.17, you'll no longer be able to set Restic as an uploader type, either in the install or in the server. That'll be an error at that point.
Yeah, so Scott, you're right. I'm reading it. It's n+2 for the initial deprecation, and then for the restorable bit of it, it's another n+2. So in 119, basically, if you try to restore a backup that uses Restic, that'll error out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think
maybe.
I think we have already get the deprecation policy MR merged, right? I think we have discussed.
Yes,
the policy
thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah. So let's follow the policy to do the deprecation for any of the feature. So it's really good.
Okay. Yeah, I think this will follow the policy. And And maybe here we can also open an issue in the GitHub, right? And
Yes, we need to open an issue to talking about the deprecation.
Yeah, that should be done now, so that, you know, before 1.15 comes out, so that when 1.15 comes out, we're ready to say, as part of that release, it is now deprecated in 1.15. It is no longer, you know, it's supported, but you know, you get a warning.
Right.
So
We should
you
do
know,
it now. Yeah.
Yeah. So any issues we need to open in GitHub in preparation for deprecation, now would be the time to start that.
Right.
okay.
I'll start a kill Restic campaign. We'll get the votes.
Okay. Okay, that's I one last confirmation. So I think this is what we are talking, what we have just mentioned, right? So here, at least for everyone of us here, we agree on this process, right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's what matches the deprecation policy as I'm reading it. But yeah, I mean, the test is not whether we agree, it's whether it matches the merged deprecation policy.
Well, and what we agree on is that 1.15 is the release that we deprecated. I think everything else
Yes, sir.
follows from the +2+2.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not hearing anyone opposed to deprecating it in 1.15.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, then I will create a GitHub issue later for this one. But I still have some one more question. If we open the issue and okay, if we don't get enough approvement, are we still going with this one in 1.15?
You mean if we don't get enough, it's the maintainers vote. It says here, you just need 50% of the maintainers +1 to deprecate it.
So yeah, I don't see any issue there unless there's, again, unless there's somebody that's not saying anything in the call that wants to keep it around longer. I don't think any maintainer that I'm aware of is opposed to deprecating Restic at this point. So we just need to make sure that we get everybody to participate in that discussion on the GitHub issue to make sure, you know, we get those +1s, you know, in time, because this is something we want to make sure. And we should put this on the milestone, you know, the 1.15 milestones to say this is something we're doing in 1.15, and then actually, you know, create the PR that makes the change, that does the warnings and all.
Okay, I got that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think having enough information for this one. I think. The next one. So what's Scott? I'll go ahead, please.
Sure. I'll let Scott take a break. So with regards to, that particular issue and potentially exposing some of the Copia configuration options, I just wanted to let you guys know we're doing some performance testing on some of the various options that Copia provides for the splitting and the hashing of the split files. And while we're doing it, if we happen to find significant performance differences between what is default now and maybe some of the other options, I think we would raise it here. But I wanted just to double check if we did, like maybe in a week or two time, would you reconsider the notion that users should not be exposed to that because it's too, I agree, it's pretty in-depth for a user to set it, but in conjunction with support or an engineering team, I could see the use case where a particular large customer with a ton of PVs densely packed in a particular namespace might benefit from a different configuration.
Yeah, and some more context here is that, we've had some users that, customers that they're saying, hey, we have all these volumes, we might have hundreds of volumes, and we're, it's taking hours to do the backups, and we want to run these every day within a certain window. And the fact that Copia backups are incremental helps a lot. But what we're seeing in some of our performance testing is even those incremental backups, even the backups that only put a small portion of the data up there into the bucket are still taking half as long as the original backup, possibly because of the Copia processing. That we don't have enough data to say, hey, we have a fix yet. But if we do come up with a way of changing the Copia configuration that in some of those environments might cut the time in half, for example, then we'd kind of want a way of letting the customer do that.
Okay, so here I think we are talking about the two options: the hashing algorithm and the splitting algorithm. So here I think the hash one that will change a little, for different data, but that will change. That will heavily, related to the CPU and the memory, or especially the CPU available in the environment. So for some algorithm, it takes more CPU, and for some it takes not that much. And for splitting algorithm, so I think that indeed, perform differently for different data patterns. I mean, for some data patterns, it gets more, deduplicated data blocks, and for some it cannot make that efficient enough. But I still think that both options, users cannot manage to set a correct one without enough testing of in their environment and of their own data. So, and if we vote that option to users, and that will make the performance different, differently, and we cannot manage to say what is going on and what happened. Because we need to check the user's environment and user's data one by one. I personally, I don't think we have enough resource and time on that. That is my major concern. And about the development usage, for example, someone with the development upon the Velero and want to change that data, I think they could just fork the Velero and change the option in the code. And I'm not sure if that is enough. So just let me know if we have some other scenarios. That's the first part. And about the incremental backup that Scott had just mentioned, I don't think that it's related to the two options. For the incremental, since we are doing the file system level incremental, that means that even though there is only one file change, we still need to traverse the entire file system and to say that this file has been changed. So how is this one answer your question?
I think I agree with most of what you said, and Scott, feel free to jump in. Our concern more is with block volume and not the file system volume. It is something that would be terribly difficult to debug if customers were playing around with it and then shot themselves in the foot and caused problems. I 100% agree. There is the Copia benchmark command that could lend some insight to customers to make the right decision about their particular environment. It could be possible for us to construct some documentation that would hopefully walk them through the right decisions. Although I tend to agree. This is just another switch that could make things more complicated for our debugging, but at the same time, being able to help a customer change to a more efficient algorithm for their particular environment would be nice. So
I mean, it's the kind of thing where I kind of wonder if you could handle some of this with the documentation, saying this is an advanced option. If you use this and have poor performance, the first thing we're going to ask you to do, if you open a GitHub issue, is to remove this config and try the default config. But at the same time, to the point that Wes is making about specific customers, is that on the other hand, if there's a customer that says, hey, my backups are taking 4 hours each, and I know I can tweak that config in Copia and turn that into, 2.5 hours. We kind of, if we see results like that, and we don't have numbers yet, we can't prove any of that. But I'm saying if we can see results that are significant, then we kind of want to right away. If we're only taking 5% off with this changes, then yeah, it may not be worth it. I think we need to get some more data to see exactly how much of an improvement we're looking at before we go too much further with this.
Well, and just to reiterate more specifically, I think on a first backup, we saw the initial backup to be 3.8 terabytes of data in 2 hours, 23 minutes. I'm not looking at it right now, but
that's right.
And then the second backup was 0.1 terabyte. So it was just incremental.
Yeah, much smaller because
and it took, and it took an hour and a half. So
sorry, could you repeat the case?
Yeah, so the first backup for this namespace was 3.8 terabytes in the Copia directory in S3 in the backup repository. And the second backup, the additional files copied were 0.1 terabytes. So the Copia repo now had 3.9 terabytes total. The first backup took 2 hours and 23 minutes. The second backup took an hour and a half. So we are kind of drawing conclusions that it's in the, checking the diff.
I mean, most of the time was spent on the Copia side because the actual content uploaded to the repository was only 5% for the second one because it was an incremental, so not much had changed. But the actual time it took to run the backup was, more than half as much. So, maybe it's 50-60%.
Well, basically, so it's the first time I hear this case, but basically, I don't think that it's about the hashing or splitting algorithm, because as you mentioned, they are because so as the process of the uploader. So first of all, it will traverse the file system and find the files that need to be copied. That is had been changed since the previous backup. So if a file is not decided as a change, it will not call the hashing or splitting or hashing, like splitting or hashing. So I think the problem is still about the traversing. And the file system traversing is time consuming and resource consuming. So here, I think
So there's one piece of information here that's also specifically relevant. Is this was a block? These were all block mode files, volumes. So from the Copia's point of view, each file system was one big file.
Yeah. Okay, if it is a block one, and so you think since the files that are changed a little bit, and the default hashing or splitting algorithm is not that sufficient enough. Is that your
that's a theory. So what Wes was trying to say is, before we do anything else here, we want to actually do some testing to say, just build a custom Velero image that changes that to a different algorithm, run the same backups, see if we're seeing any results. And one possibility is there's no change in performance. if that's the case, then most of what we're saying here is not
Well,
necessarily relevant.
I think if that is about the hashing or splitting, I think I'm afraid you are so for the block mode backup, you will need to run. You will need to run the testing or run the benchmark for every backup or after every data change, because one even one block in the volume is changed, it will affect the entire splitting processing. So splitting may be very different, right? So that is to say, personally, I think that is the benchmark is not, how to say, it's not, it's not a good enough way to handle this case. So, and you run it for every backup, or you don't run it. You just go with the current algorithm, right? So here, my suggestion is like this one, and if we see in this scenario in user, so first of all, the hashing and the splitting algorithms are all very basic algorithms provided. I mean the ones provided by the Copia code. So you can get that algorithm everywhere you can Google them. So that's very basic one, and I don't think any algorithm it is good enough or for many environments. That is only a basic solution. So so if you think or if you meet a case that you need to change this options, I think you can so for downstream code you can just do it from the downstream. From the upstream, we'll control a very basic of the default one, and or in other words, I don't think this default one will make very efficient readout to most of the users' environment, but that will make something better or make a basic deduplication readout, and for the downstream code or like a product that is delivering copy Velero, I think after this this configuration, I mean the backup reported configuration has been merged, you can be very easily change the add a new flag into the existing code. Does that make sense to? Does that make sense?
I think having an answer is good. The certainty of where we want to put this in. We still might share results up here, but I think if we have to do it downstream, that's acceptable.
Yeah, because the basic concern here is like if we keep this in upstream, we will be able to we will need to pay much more time to check, with the user and check the data, check the environment to see if this problem is caused about the change of the option. That is point one. And point two, from my point of view, I don't think this algorithms, I mean, all the ones provided by Copia are powerful enough comparing to some commercial solutions or solutions that they are powerful enough to handle most of the cases of commonly or universally in the user's environment. So that means we just make it as a default one, and at least we get a same readout or same performance, not same performance, or we get a same behavior in all users' environment, and we don't need to pay that much time to troubleshoot in users' environment. And from the downstream, either Red Hat downstream or our own downstream, we may just work with user more tightly with more time, and if we identify this is about the hashing or splitting algorithm, we have just change that. And the final idea, I think, if even we change it one by one, and finally we will see that all the environments, all the algorithms just not enough for particular user. And for that, I think
I mean, I think yeah, that's fine if that's the stance. Yeah, Broadcom wants to take. I think we're going to do some performance testing, measure the improvements, and come to some conclusions. If we don't, as a community, want to deal with the trouble that might incur, that's fine. I think that this does fit into an upstream downstream difference. That's fine. And what you're saying is all perfectly reasonable. We're just going to try and get some data before we come to any conclusions on it.
Okay. And after after this backup repository completion code is merged, I think you can further check how to add new ones if you want, if you like, and if there is any problem, or if you have some more concerns on this, and we can continue to discuss.
Okay.
Okay.
Scott, are you good with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's all for the today's topic. Anything else? If not, I think we can finish off the meeting here today. Thanks for joining, and have a good day and good evening. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.